I turned 21 on March 17th. That detail matters, because everything before that date belongs to someone else. A version of me who still believed my family was just unlucky. Poor health. Short lives. Too many funerals for one bloodline. That's what I told people. That's what I told myself. At 12:04 a.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. Not rang. Knocked. 3 times. Slow. Precise. I remember because I was staring at the microwave clock when it happened, waiting for the numbers to flip. I'd bought a small cake from the grocery store downstairs. Vanilla. Cheap frosting. I hadn't cut it yet. My phone was face down on the counter. No messages. No calls. My parents were already dead. My grandparents too. That was another pattern I tried not to think about. The knocking didn't sound urgent. It sounded official. I looked through the peephole. The hallway lights flickered the way they always did, but the man standing there didn't flicker with them. He wore a dark coat, too formal for the building, and he was holding a clipboard. Not a metaphorical clipboard. An actual one, wooden, with paper clipped to it. I opened the door because some instincts are older than fear. Elias Moore? He said without asking. Yes. It's time. That was all. No explanation. No emotion. He turned and walked toward the stairwell, not the elevator. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, my hand still on the door handle, cake melting slowly behind me. I followed him. We didn't talk on the stairs. I noticed small things instead. The smell of disinfectant clinging to his coat. The sound of his shoes, rubber soles, like hospital footwear. The way the emergency exit sign above the stairwell glowed too bright, humming softly. Outside, a black van waited at the curb. No markings. Engine running. The side door slid open on its own. I should have run. I know that now. But my family raised me on rules we never explained. Always answer official knocks. Never refuse a summons. Never ask too many questions on your birthday. The inside of the van was clean in a way that felt aggressive. No dirt. No dust. The seats were metal, bolted to the floor. There were no windows in the back. The door shut behind me with a heavy, sealed sound, like a freezer closing. We drove for a long time. I tracked it by counting turns. Left. Right. Over a bridge. I could feel the vibration change. Then underground. The air pressure shifted. My ears popped. The lights inside the van flickered red for a moment before returning to white. Finally, we stopped. The door opened to a hallway that looked like a government building that had been abandoned and then repurposed by something that didn't care about comfort. Concrete walls. Fluorescent lights. Lines painted on the floor in faded colors, yellow, red, black, intersecting and diverging like transit routes. A sign on the wall read, Registry, Level C. The man gestured for me to follow. As we walked, I began to hear other things. Footsteps behind walls. Distant coughing. The squeak of carts rolling across tile. Somewhere far away, a bell rang once. Not an alarm. Just a single chime. We entered a large room filled with desks. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each desk had a lamp, stacks of paper, and a person working silently. Some looked human. Some did not. I don't have better language for that yet. I just know my eyes slid off certain details, like my brain refused to finish the image. No one looked up. At the center of the room was a counter, like in a courthouse. An old woman sat behind it, her hair pulled back tight, her glasses hanging low on her nose. She was stamping documents at an inhuman speed. She looked up when I approached. 8th generation, she said, flipping through a file without being handed one. Late as usual. I don't understand, I said. She sighed, the sound sharp and irritated. None of you ever do. She slid a form toward me. The paper was thick, yellowed, warm to the touch. At the top was my full name. Date of birth. Place of birth. Cause of death, blank. Sign, she said. What is this? The claiming. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It came out wrong, thin and nervous. This is insane. She leaned forward then, and for the first time I saw her eyes clearly. They were clouded, like cataracts, but behind them was something alert. Ancient. Tired. Your family has served for 8 generations, she said. You are bound at 21. You serve until you produce an heir. Or until you are released. Which has not happened yet. My mouth felt dry. Serve who? The lights dimmed. Something moved behind me. The air changed, thickened, like before a storm. I smelled rot and antiseptic at the same time. A presence settled into the room, heavy and patient. Plague, the woman said calmly. Angel of death. Disease, infection, failure. Approximately 3,000 collections per day. I turned slowly. He stood there like a man shaped by absence. Tall. Wrapped in dark layers that looked like cloth until you focused on them too long. His face was visible, but wrong, too still, too symmetrical. His eyes were dull, like old glass. He looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a chart. This one will do, he said. My arm burned before I saw what was happening. I screamed as heat tore into my skin, words carving themselves deep into my flesh. Not ink. Not fire. Something precise and intentional. 5 lines. 5 rules. I only understood the first one before I passed out. Do not interfere with the chosen. When I woke up, my arm was bandaged. My head ached. Plague was still there, watching me patiently. Welcome, he said. You answer when death calls now. And somewhere far away, a bell rang again. Once. I woke up in a room that smelled like bleach and old paper. The ceiling was low concrete, cracked in thin spiderweb lines. A single fluorescent tube buzzed above me, flickering just enough to make my eyes ache. I was lying on a narrow cot with a vinyl mattress, the kind hospitals stopped using years ago because they were too hard to clean properly. My mouth tasted metallic. My left arm throbbed. I sat up slowly. The bandage around my arm was thick, layered, already stained through with something dark and tacky. Dry blood, maybe? Or something close enough. A metal chair scraped against the floor. I hadn't noticed Plague sitting in the corner. He didn't move when I flinched. He just watched me, his posture unnervingly relaxed, like someone waiting for an elevator. Up close, the smell was stronger, rot layered with disinfectant, the scent of infection after it's been treated too late. You screamed longer than most, he said. His voice was calm, flat, without echo. Your grandfather fainted immediately. Your uncle fought. My uncle? I asked. My throat hurt when I spoke. I don't have an uncle. Plague tilted his head slightly. You did. Something about the way he said it shut me up. He stood and crossed the room in 3 slow steps. The light above him dimmed as he passed beneath it, not flickering, dimmed, as if absorbed. He reached for my arm. I pulled back instinctively. His hand stopped an inch from my skin. That was wise, he said. Second rule. He picked up a clipboard from a nearby table and flipped it around so I could see. The paper looked exactly like normal paper, except the ink seemed to sink into it, as if the words were bruises rather than text. He read them aloud. Rule 1. Do not interfere with the chosen. I swallowed. Chosen for what? For me, he said. For death. He turned the page. Rule 2. Guard the Reaper. Never touch the scythe. I didn't see it. You will, he said, and continued without pause. Rule 3. Speak of nothing you witness. Not to family. Not to strangers. Not to God. The last word landed heavier than the others. Rule 4. Answer when death calls. What does that mean? I asked. Plague finally looked directly at me. His eyes weren't glowing. They weren't empty either. They were focused. Intent. You will know, he said. He turned the final page. Rule 5. You do not abandon the Reaper. Not until the bloodline releases you. My arm burned as if reacting to the words. I reached up and peeled back part of the bandage despite myself. The rules were there. Scarred into my skin in raised, angry lines. Not English. Something older. But when I looked at them, I understood them perfectly. How long? I asked quietly. Plague didn't answer right away. That depends, he said eventually. On your compliance. And on your fertility. The word made my stomach drop. You will accompany me now, he added. Observation only. You are not ready to be seen. The room dissolved. I don't have a better way to describe it. 1 second I was sitting on the cot, the next I was standing in the corner of a hospital room, my back pressed against a cold tile wall. The sound hit me first. Monitors beeping. A ventilator wheezing rhythmically. The soft hiss of oxygen. Somewhere down the hall, a cart rattled. Voices murmured behind glass. The room was dim. Curtains half drawn. An elderly man lay in the bed, his chest rising unevenly. His skin was grayish-yellow, stretched tight over bone. His mouth hung open slightly, saliva pooled at the corner. Plague stood at the foot of the bed. No one reacted to him. A nurse entered, checked the floor, adjusted a drip, and left without a glance in his direction. Her shoulder passed through Plague's arm like smoke through smoke. They can't see you, I whispered. They don't need to, Plague replied. The man in the bed gasped. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. Panic surged briefly, then faded into exhaustion. What time? He rasped. Plague stepped closer. I felt something pull in my chest, a pressure like my lungs wanted to collapse inward. The air around us thickened. The lights dimmed just slightly. Plague leaned down, close to the man's ear. It's over, he said. There was no drama. No scream. No sudden movement. The man exhaled. And did not inhale again. The monitor screamed. Nurses rushed in. A doctor followed. They shouted numbers. Someone called time of death. Hands moved fast, practiced, desperate in a way that came too late to matter. I stood there, frozen, my heart hammering. Plague watched without expression. This is mercy, he said. His organs were failing. Pain was inevitable. I shortened it. As they covered the body with a sheet, something shifted. I noticed a shape near the ceiling, faint and translucent. A distortion in the air, like heat above asphalt. It drifted upward, slow and confused. I stared. Plague placed himself between me and it. Do not focus on that, he said sharply. The pressure in my chest intensified. What was that? I asked. He turned his head just enough for me to see his profile. That, he said, is why Rule 1 exists. The room dissolved again. This time, we were standing in a hallway outside a pediatric ward. The walls were painted with cartoon animals. A giraffe with chipped paint smiled crookedly at us. The smell of disinfectant was stronger here, layered with something sweet and artificial. A little girl sat on a plastic chair, swinging her legs. She clutched a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. Her eyes were red. Her face streaked with dried tears. Plague stopped walking. I followed his gaze. Inside the room behind the glass, a woman lay motionless. Machines surrounded her, silent now. Doctors spoke in low voices. A nurse shook her head slowly. The girl looked up. She looked directly at us. My blood ran cold. Her eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but recognition. She leaned forward and whispered, "Mommy?" Plague stiffened. "That is rare," he said quietly. "Children see more than they should." The girl stood, her rabbit dropping to the floor. She walked toward us, small hands reaching out. I felt an overwhelming urge to move. To kneel. To say something. Anything. My arm burned violently. Rule 3. Plague extended one finger. The girl stopped mid-step. Her expression went slack, like someone waking from a dream. She blinked, looked around, confused. A nurse rushed in and guided her away gently. As we vanished from the hallway, Plague spoke again. "You will learn," he said, "that the hardest part is not death." "What is?" I asked. He looked at me. "Remembering who you were before you learned to accept it." The bell rang. Once. Somewhere very close. After that first hospital, time stopped behaving the way I expected it to. I would wake up in my apartment with the smell of disinfectant still in my nose, my shoes muddy or damp or stained with something I didn't remember stepping in. My phone would show missed calls I couldn't recall hearing. Sometimes days passed between summons. Sometimes hours. Once it was minutes. Death did not care about my schedule. The first time I heard the call, I thought it was tinnitus. A thin ringing in my right ear, high-pitched and steady. I pressed my palm against it, swallowed, shook my head. It didn't go away. It sharpened, focused, until it resolved into a sound that wasn't sound at all, more like pressure shaped into a command. Answer. My apartment dissolved around me mid-step. I found myself standing in the back seat of a car that smelled like old coffee and wet fabric. Rain hammered the windshield. The wipers moved frantically, squealing with each pass. A man gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Plague sat beside him in the passenger seat. The man didn't see him. He was crying. Silent, breathless sobs, eyes fixed on the road. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up with a name I could see clearly. Emily. He ignored it. "Pulmonary embolism," Plague said quietly, as if narrating a documentary. "Undiagnosed. Sudden onset." The man gasped, one hand flying to his chest. The car swerved. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. I felt my body lean instinctively, bracing for impact. "Do not interfere," Plague said. The man slammed into the median at full speed. Metal shrieked. Glass exploded. Airbags deployed with a deafening crack. The world folded in on itself. And then it was quiet. The man hung limply against the seatbelt, blood trickling down his temple. His eyes were open, unfocused. Outside, headlights passed slowly, drivers gawking before moving on. Plague leaned in close. "It's done," he said. Something slipped free from the man's body, subtle and wrong, like a shadow peeling itself off the wall. It hovered, trembled, then drifted away. The ringing stopped. We were gone. I vomited the moment I woke up in my bathroom. Nothing but bile came up. My hands shook violently as I gripped the sink. When I looked in the mirror, my pupils were blown wide, swallowing almost all the color. On my arm, the scars had darkened. The next weeks blurred together into a series of scenes that refused to fade. A dialysis ward where machines hummed like insects and bodies lay still under thin blankets. A nursing home where the hallways smelled of urine and boiled vegetables, and plague moved room to room with methodical efficiency. A subway platform late at night, where a man collapsed quietly against a pillar and commuters stepped around him, annoyed, until it was too late. Always the same pattern. Plague appeared. Time bent. The chosen faltered. Death arrived with no ceremony. And always, people didn't see us. At first, that was a relief. Then it became unbearable. Because I started noticing the exceptions. A homeless man on a park bench who stared directly at Plague and whispered. Finally. A woman in an ICU who locked eyes with me and mouthed, "Help me." An old priest who crossed himself and began reciting prayers in a language I didn't recognize as Plague approached. And children. Always children. They stared too long. Asked questions their parents couldn't hear. Clung tighter when Plague drew near. Once, in a grocery store, a little boy tugged on my jacket and said, "Why does that man smell like my grandma's room?" Plague turned his head sharply. The boy's mother scolded him, distracted, apologetic. She never noticed the way Plague's shadow stretched unnaturally across the linoleum. "Why can they see you?" I asked later, my voice shaking. Plague was guiding me through a long corridor beneath a hospital, where pipes ran along the ceiling and the air was warm and damp. Each step echoed. "Perception weakens near thresholds," he said. "Children. The dying. Those who have nothing left to lose." "And me?" I asked. "Why can I see everything?" He stopped walking. "You are not seeing," he said. "You are remembering." That night, I dreamed of my family. Not the versions I knew. Not my parents, young and laughing in old photos. Not my grandparents in stiff formal portraits. I dreamed of them standing beside Plague. My grandfather, thinner than I remembered, his eyes hollow. My great-grandmother, her hair bound back, her arms scarred with familiar markings. They stood silently as Plague worked. Watching. Guarding. Never touching. I woke up screaming. I tried to tell someone. Not the truth. Just pieces. I told a coworker I was having panic attacks. I told my doctor I was seeing things. I told a therapist I felt detached from reality. None of it helped. Medication dulled the edges but not the images. Therapy gave me words that didn't fit what I was experiencing. And every time I tried to explain too much, my arm burned painfully, the scars tightening like fresh wounds. Rule 3. The registry called me back one afternoon. Not with a summons. With a file. The same woman sat behind the counter, stamping documents. She slid a thin folder across to me without looking up. "Family discrepancy," she said. "You should be aware." Inside were photographs. Black and white. Grainy. Old. Men and women standing beside Plague, their faces tense, resigned. Each photo labeled with a name and a date. I recognized one. Robert Moore, 1987. My uncle. The one who never existed. "What happened to him?" I asked. The woman paused her stamping. "He violated Rule 1, she said. Interfered with the chosen. Tried to stop a death. What happened to him?" I repeated. She finally looked up. "He was unclaimed," she said. "Not killed. Not alive. Removed." I felt cold spread through my chest. "Removed how?" She leaned closer. Have you ever tried to remember someone and failed? She asked. Not forgotten. Failed. The bell rang. This time, it rang twice. Plague appeared beside me. It's time, he said. You will observe something larger. Larger than what? I asked. He looked at me with something like pity. A system, he said. And the cost of believing you can change it. As the world folded inward again, I realized something terrible. The ringing in my ear wasn't a summons anymore. It was becoming constant. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot this time. Not antiseptic. Smoke. Thick, oily, chemical smoke that coated the back of my throat and made my eyes sting. The sound followed next, alarms, overlapping and frantic, echoing through a large enclosed space. Shouting. The crackle of fire. We were standing inside a hospital. Not a ward. Not an ICU. An administrative wing. Paper burned fast. I could hear it, the dry, ravenous sound of flames devouring files, folders, decades of records. Sprinklers had failed. Or been disabled. Water did not fall from the ceiling. Only sparks. Plague stood beside me, perfectly still, untouched by heat or smoke. His presence felt heavier here, denser, as if the building itself was aware of him. Stay behind me, he said. I did. Through shattered glass, I saw staff running. Security shouting instructions no one followed. A woman in a lab coat slammed her fist against a locked door, screaming for someone on the other side to open it. They won't, Plague said calmly. The locks engage automatically during containment failures. This is a hospital, I said hoarsely. People are trapped. Yes. Then why? I stopped myself. Rule 1. Plague walked forward. I followed, my legs moving on instinct alone. We passed through smoke-filled corridors, stepping over fallen ceiling tiles and overturned carts. Somewhere nearby, someone coughed wetly, struggling for air. I felt every instinct screaming at me to help. To shout. To grab someone. To do something. My arm burned, warning and threat all at once. We entered a stairwell where dozens of people were packed together, pressing upward toward an exit blocked by fire. Panic was a living thing here, thick and suffocating. Plague stopped. This is one of mine, he said. I stared at him. All of them? No, he replied. Some. How many? He didn't answer. A man collapsed near the bottom of the stairs, clutching his chest. His breathing turned shallow, then erratic. Others stepped around him, apologizing, crying, trying to save themselves. Plague knelt. The man's eyes locked onto his face. Understanding flickered there. Terror. Relief. No, the man whispered. Please. Not like this. Plague placed 2 fingers lightly against the man's forehead. And it was over. The man's body went slack. The crowd surged past him. I watched something rise from the body, faint and unstable, immediately torn apart by the chaos of the space. It didn't drift upward this time. It scattered, fragments dissolving into the smoke. I gagged. This isn't mercy, I said. This is slaughter. Plague stood. This fire will be blamed on faulty wiring, he said. Investigations will take years. Lawsuits will settle quietly. New protocols will be written. He turned to face me. And 27 deaths will be categorized as unavoidable. My stomach dropped. You planned this. No, he said. I permitted it. We moved again. Through offices where desks burned and computers melted into plastic pools. Through a records room where shelves collapsed, burying people beneath paper and ash. through a locked ward where alarms screamed until they abruptly cut out, one by one. Each time, Plague chose. Sometimes he acted quickly. Sometimes he waited. Sometimes he did nothing at all. Why them? I asked at last, my voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. Why not save some and take others? Plague stopped in front of a window overlooking the city. Fire engines crowded the streets below. Red lights flashed rhythmically against the smoke-dark sky. Because death is not random, he said. People believe it is. That comforts them. But randomness implies meaninglessness. He turned slightly. We provide structure. To what? I asked. Suffering? To inevitability, he replied. Disease. Decay. Entropy. I ensure efficiency. I thought of the little girl in the hospital hallway. The man in the car. My erased uncle. And the ones who fight? I asked. The ones who don't accept it? Plague's expression didn't change, but the air felt colder. They become errors. The world dissolved again. This time, we stood in a long underground corridor lined with doors. Each door was marked with a symbol etched into metal. Some were scratched out violently. Others were pristine. Plague gestured to one. This was Robert Moore's, he said. My chest tightened. What happened to him? I asked again. Plague placed his hand against the door. He tried to pull a child from my reach, he said. Cancer. Late stage. Weeks of agony remaining. The door opened. Inside was nothing. Not emptiness. Absence. The space inside the room bent inward, like a hole in reality. Looking at it made my vision blur and my head ache. He was removed from sequence, Plague continued. No birth. No death. No memory. I staggered back. That's worse than dying, I whispered. Yes, Plague agreed. He closed the door. That is why your family complies. As we walked away, something clicked into place in my mind. This wasn't just a job. It was leverage. Fear carefully cultivated across generations. Obedience enforced not through pain, but erasure. You said this ends when the bloodline releases me, I said. What does that mean? Plague stopped walking. You will produce an heir, he said. They will be claimed at 21. You will be free. And if I don't? Plague looked at me. You will continue, he said, until your body fails. Then another will be chosen. The bell rang. 3 times. I felt it in my teeth. Plague turned toward the sound. This next one, he said, will test you. The corridor began to dissolve. As it did, I noticed something carved faintly into the wall beside Robert's door. A message. Scratched deep enough to last. We were never meant to watch this much. I don't remember screaming. But my throat hurt when we arrived. We arrived in my apartment. That was the first thing that broke me. Not a hospital. Not a street. Not some anonymous place filled with strangers. My apartment. The same narrow living room. The same chipped coffee table. The same cheap vanilla cake, now collapsed in on itself, frosting cracked and gray at the edges. I could smell it, sweet and sour. The microwave clock still read 12:04. My birthday had never finished. My chest tightened so hard I thought my ribs might crack. This isn't possible, I said. Plague stood near the window, looking out over the city as if he owned it. The street lights below flickered, one by one, like a slow pulse. Time is cooperative, he said. It bends when instructed. I noticed someone sitting on my couch. A man. Early 30s. Stubble on his jaw. Familiar posture. He was hunched forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly his fingers had gone white. I recognized him before I understood why. It was my neighbor Thomas. The one who lived across the hall. We nodded at each other sometimes. Borrowed tools once. He helped me carry groceries when my arm was in a sling after the branding and I told him I'd had surgery. "Why is he here?" I asked. Plague turned. "Because you asked what it means to be tested." Thomas was breathing too fast. His eyes darted around the room, unfocused. His phone buzzed repeatedly on the coffee table. I could see the name on the screen. She fell an hour ago," Thomas said suddenly, speaking into the empty room. His voice shook. "I got the call while I was in the shower. They said she collapsed in the kitchen. She lives alone. I didn't answer right away." His phone buzzed again. Plague moved closer to him. I stepped forward instinctively. My arm ignited with pain. Rule 1. "Is she alive?" I asked Plague, my voice breaking. "His mother." "Yes," Plague said. "For now." Thomas looked up. His eyes locked onto Plague. Then onto me. "Oh God," he whispered. "Who are you?" I froze. Plague's head snapped toward him. "That is unusual," he said softly. Thomas stood, backing away slowly. You're not supposed to be here." My heart pounded so loud I thought Thomas might hear it. Plague raised one hand. Thomas screamed. Not in pain. In recognition. "No," Thomas sobbed. "Please." "I'll go. I'm going now. I'll call an ambulance. You already did," Plague said. Thomas's phone vibrated again, then went still. I looked at the screen. Call ended. "His mother has suffered a cerebral hemorrhage," Plague said. "Severe. Irreversible. She will not regain consciousness." Thomas shook his head violently. "That's not true. She was fine yesterday. I just talked to her. She—" Plague stepped closer. "This ends now," he said. Something in me snapped. I don't remember deciding to move. I remember being on my knees, gripping Plague's arm. The pain was immediate and indescribable. It felt like my bones were being crushed from the inside, my blood turning to fire. The scars on my arm split open, bleeding freely. Plague did not pull away. He looked down at my hand on his sleeve. The room went silent. Thomas stared at me, eyes wide with hope. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't let him." Plague's voice dropped. "You know the rule," he said. "I know," I gasped. "But I also know what you said. You said death isn't random. You said you provide structure. Meaning." I tightened my grip despite the pain. "Where is the meaning in this?" Plague's eyes darkened. "For you?" he asked. "Or for him?" The pressure in my skull intensified. My vision blurred. I felt something tugging at me, not physically, but deeper, like my place in the world was loosening. "You interfere," Plague said calmly, "and you will be removed." I thought of my uncle, of the empty room, of never having existed. I thought of 8 generations watching silently. And I thought of the message scratched into the wall. We were never meant to watch this much. "Then let me watch this," I said through clenched teeth. "And still choose." For the first time, Plague hesitated. It was subtle. A fraction of a second. But it was real. Thomas's phone rang again. This time, it was the hospital. Plague looked at it. Then at me. Very well, he said. He withdrew his hand. The ringing in my ear stopped abruptly. Thomas collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Plague turned to me. This does not save her, he said. It delays the inevitable. She will die in 3 days. Painfully. I know, I said. But it will be hers. Plague leaned close, his face inches from mine. You have violated Rule 1, he said. I know. The world began to distort around us. The walls stretched. The ceiling sagged. The air thickened into something syrupy and suffocating. Plague straightened. But you did not interfere with the chosen, he continued. You interfered with me. My heart skipped. That is, undefined. The pain in my arm subsided slightly. Plague stepped back. This is your warning, he said. There will not be another. The apartment snapped back into place. Thomas was gone. The cake was gone. The clock blinked 12:05. Plague stood by the door. You will answer when death calls, he said. And death will remember this. He vanished. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking. When I finally slept, I dreamed of my arm. A 6th line was forming beneath the others. Not carved yet. Waiting. After that night, I stopped pretending I could live a normal life. I still went to work. I still answered emails. I still nodded politely at neighbors in the hallway. But everything felt staged, like I was moving through a set built to resemble reality. The edges didn't line up anymore. Sounds lagged a half-second behind actions. Faces felt flatter, less dimensional, like masks stretched over something hollow. The ringing never fully left my ear again. It softened sometimes, faded into a dull pressure, but it was always there, waiting. Listening. 3 days after Thomas collapsed in my apartment, Plague came for me without warning. No ringing. No gradual pull. 1 second I was brushing my teeth, staring at myself in the mirror, noting how the scars on my arm had darkened again. The next, I was standing in a hospital hallway I recognized immediately. Same pediatric wing. Same chipped giraffe on the wall. The smell hit me hard, antiseptic, plastic, and something sour beneath it. Fear, maybe? Or grief. Plague stood beside me, his presence heavier than usual. Denser. Like gravity increased around him. You remember this place, he said. I nodded. A woman screamed somewhere down the hall. We walked. Inside one of the rooms, Thomas stood beside a hospital bed, gripping the railing so tightly his hands trembled. Machines hummed softly. The woman in the bed, his mother, was small beneath the sheets, her face pale, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. She was alive. Barely. She's been unconscious for 72 hours, Plague said. Her brain is swelling. The pressure will become unbearable soon. Thomas looked up. He saw us both immediately. His face crumpled with relief and terror. You, he whispered. Then, to Plague, you said 3 days. Plague inclined his head slightly. I said she would die in 3 days, he replied. Not how. Thomas turned to me. You did this, he said. Not accusing. Desperate. You gave me time. I sat with her. I talked to her. I told her everything I never said. My chest tightened. That time, Plague said, is now over. Thomas shook his head. No. Please. Just wait. She squeezed my hand earlier. She knows I'm here. She knows pain, Plague corrected. Nothing else. The machines began to alarm softly. A nurse hurried past the door, glancing in, then continued on. I felt the familiar pull in my chest. The call. This time, it wasn't ringing. It was pressure. Like hands closing around my lungs. Answer, Plague said. I realized then what Rule 4 meant. It wasn't about showing up. It was about choosing to be present. Plague moved toward the bed. Thomas stepped in front of him. No, he said. You can't. Plague did not slow. I stepped forward. My arm burned violently. The scars throbbed, split, bled. Plague stopped inches from Thomas. He turned to me. This one, he said, is chosen. I know, I said. And you are bound. I know. And you still hesitate. I looked at Thomas's mother. Her chest rose shallowly, irregularly. Sweat beaded at her hairline. Her fingers twitched weakly against the sheets. I thought of my uncle erased. Of the registry doors. Of 8 generations who watched and said nothing. She's suffering, I said quietly. Yes, Plague replied. And so will you. He extended his hand. The room darkened. I heard Thomas sob. Something inside me shifted. Not broke. Aligned. Then let me do it, I said. Plague froze. Thomas looked at me, horrified. What? He whispered. I'll answer, I said. I'll take responsibility. Plague studied me carefully. That is not your function, he said. It can be, I replied. You said death needs structure. Let this be part of it. The pressure in the room intensified. The lights flickered. The machine stuttered. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Plague stepped aside. Proceed, he said. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might collapse. I approached the bed slowly. Every step felt like wading through thick mud. I reached out, hands shaking, and placed 2 fingers gently against the woman's forehead, exactly where Plague always touched. Her skin was hot. Too hot. I'm sorry, I whispered. I don't know if you can hear me. Her breathing hitched. For a second, nothing happened. Then she exhaled. And didn't inhale again. The machine screamed. Thomas collapsed to his knees, screaming her name. Something tore loose from the woman's body, not drifting, not scattering, but snapping free violently, like a cord being cut. It brushed past me, and for a split second I felt everything she had felt in those final days. The headache. The pressure. The confusion. The fear. I screamed. When it was over, I was on the floor, gasping, tears streaming down my face. Plague stood over me. You have crossed a boundary, he said. I know, I sobbed. So erase me. Remove me. Do it. Plague did not move. No, he said. I looked up at him. You answered when death called, he continued. You acted with intent. With mercy. He gestured to my arm. The pain flared once, searing. When I looked down, the 6th line had been carved fully into my skin. I understood it instantly. You will carry what you take. Plague's voice softened, just slightly. You are no longer only a guard, he said. You are becoming something else. What? I whispered. He turned away. That, he said, is why the others will notice you now. The bell rang. Not once. Not twice. But many times, overlapping, distant and near. Plague looked toward the sound. The other angels, he said. They are aware. The hospital dissolved around us. As we vanished, I saw Thomas still on the floor, clutching his mother's body, screaming. He didn't look at me. I don't think he could see me anymore. When I woke up at home, my phone was ringing. A number I didn't recognize. I answered it without thinking. A voice on the other end whispered my name. And said, "You weren't supposed to be able to do that." I didn't sleep after that call. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone still in my hand long after the line went dead, staring at the blank screen as if it might explain itself. My apartment felt smaller than it ever had, the walls pressing in, the air stale and heavy. Every sound, pipes knocking, a car passing outside, someone coughing in another unit, made me flinch. The ringing in my ear was gone. That terrified me more than anything else. At 3:12 a.m., the lights went out. Not just in my apartment. I could tell by the sudden absence of city noise, the way the hum beneath everything vanished all at once. No traffic. No distant sirens. No elevators. Silence, thick and deliberate. Then the shadows started moving. Not flickering. Sliding. They detached themselves from corners, from beneath furniture, from the spaces where light never quite reached. They gathered in the center of the room, folding inward, stretching upward, shaping themselves into figures. Plural. Plague appeared last. He did not look at me. He faced the others. There were 3 of them. One was tall and thin, wrapped in layers of something that looked like parchment skin. Its presence dried the air, cracked my lips, made my throat ache with thirst. When it moved, I heard the rustle of empty grain sacks. Famine. Another was broad-shouldered, armored in something that might once have been metal. It smelled like blood and oil and burned soil. Its hands were stained dark, as if they had never been clean. When it breathed, the walls vibrated faintly. War. The third took longer to understand. At first, I thought it was just an old man. Bent. Frail. Wearing a simple coat. But when I focused, my vision slipped. His face seemed to change every time I looked. Young, old, familiar, unfamiliar. He smelled like dust and old books and closed rooms. Old age. They did not introduce themselves. They didn't need to. "You violated sequence," Orr said. His voice scraped like metal dragged across concrete. "You altered a collection," Famine added, softer, almost curious. "That has consequences." Old age leaned forward, peering at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You accelerated," he murmured. "And you endured." Plague finally turned to me. "You were not meant to act," he said. "Only to observe." "I followed the rules," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to steady it. "I answered when death called." "That rule," War said, "was not written for you." Famine circled me slowly. Each step made my stomach knot. "Bloodlines are tools. Vessels. They watch so we do not have to." Old age smiled faintly. "But this one watched too closely." Plague raised a hand, and the others fell silent. "He carries what he takes now," Plague said. "The mark is complete." All 3 turned toward my arm. The scars burned under their gaze, each line pulsing faintly, as if alive. War scoffed. "Then end it. Remove him." "No," Old Age said. "Not yet." Famine tilted its head. "He's useful." I felt cold spread through my chest. "Useful how?" No one answered me. Instead, the room dissolved. We were standing in a city square at dawn. The sky was pale and colorless. The air was thick with smoke. Sirens wailed in the distance, layered and endless. Bodies lay scattered across the pavement. Some whole. Some not. A bombing site. War inhaled deeply. Mine, he said, satisfied. People ran past us screaming, clutching wounds, dragging others behind them. First responders moved in frantic patterns, triaging, shouting codes, making impossible decisions. War strode forward, selecting without hesitation. Each time he stopped, someone nearby faltered, collapsed, bled out, stopped moving. I felt each one. Not physically. Not exactly. But emotionally. A weight settled onto me with every death, stacking layer upon layer until my knees threatened to buckle. I gasped. Why do I feel this? Plague watched me carefully. Because you touched death, he said. And death remembers being touched. A woman staggered toward me, her abdomen soaked in blood. Her eyes were wild. Focused. She saw me. Help me, she whispered. My arm flared. War turned sharply. Do not! I froze. The woman took another step, then collapsed at my feet. Her eyes never left mine as they dimmed. Something tore loose from her body and slammed into me like a wave. I screamed. When I could breathe again, she was gone. I was on my knees. Old age crouched in front of me. This is the cost, he said gently. You wanted meaning. Now you carry it. I can't do this, I sobbed. This will kill me. Old age smiled sadly. Eventually. Plague looked away. The world shifted again. A famine zone. A hospital overwhelmed beyond function. A nursing home where no one had visited in months. Each place layered more weight onto me. Each death stayed. I didn't just see them. I remembered them. Names. Faces. Final thoughts. My mind became crowded with strangers. When we finally returned to my apartment, I collapsed onto the floor, shaking violently. War vanished without a word. Famine lingered, studying me. You will break, it said. Or you will change. Then it was gone. Only plague and old age remained. You were never meant to watch this much, old age said, echoing the message from the wall. But now that you have, you cannot stop. Old age faded. Plague knelt beside me. I did not intend this, he said quietly. But I will not undo it. Why? I whispered. Because you may become a solution, he replied. Or a warning. He stood. You will continue, he said. With me. With them. And my bloodline? I asked weakly. Plague looked down at my arm. That, he said, is accelerating. When he vanished, I was alone again. The lights came back on. The city noise returned. But something was wrong. The ringing was still gone. Instead, I could hear something else. Breathing. Not mine. All around me. As if the dead were waiting for instructions. I stopped going outside. Not all at once. At first, it was just excuses. Sick days. Groceries delivered. Ignored messages. But every time I stepped near the front door, that breathing got louder. Softer than sound, heavier than silence. Like a crowd holding its breath behind a wall. Waiting. Sleep became dangerous. I'd lie down exhausted, mind buzzing with borrowed memories, and drift for a few minutes before jolting awake, heart racing, sheets soaked with sweat, because someone had died nearby. I didn't need plague anymore to know. I felt it the way you feel a change in weather, a pressure shift behind the eyes. At 2:41 a.m. on April 2nd, a man died in the apartment below mine. I knew because my chest tightened sharply, and a flood of images that weren't mine pushed into my head, a cluttered kitchen, unpaid bills, A radio playing softly, a hand slipping from a countertop as knees buckled. Cardiac arrest. Sudden. Quiet. I hadn't been summoned. That terrified me more than anything else so far. Plague appeared an hour later, standing in my hallway as if he'd always been there. "You felt it," he said. "Yes," I whispered. My voice sounded wrong. Older. "I wasn't called." "You were aware," he corrected. "That is new." I pushed myself up from the couch. My legs shook. "What's happening to me?" Plague studied me in silence longer than he ever had before. Finally, he said, "The bloodline is responding." "To what?" "To stress," he replied. "To proximity. To exposure." He looked at my arm. The scars had changed. They weren't just raised anymore. They'd spread slightly, branching like veins beneath my skin. The sixth rule pulsed faintly, warm to the touch. "Your family was designed to observe," Plague continued. "Not to intervene. Not to remember. The separation protected them." "And me?" I asked. "You crossed it." I laughed weakly. "So what happens now?" Plague didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured, and the world folded inward again. We stood in a small bedroom painted pale yellow. The air smelled like baby powder and something sour beneath it. A nightlight shaped like a moon glowed softly near the floor. A crib. Inside it, a baby slept. My stomach dropped. A woman sat in a rocking chair beside the crib, her movements slow and exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hand rested protectively on the crib rail. I recognized her. Mara. We'd dated briefly years ago. Nothing serious. A few months. Then life drifted us apart. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. My mouth went dry. "Why are we here?" I asked. Plague watched the child. "She is dying," he said. The words hit me like a physical blow. "No. Congenital heart defect," Plague continued. "Undiagnosed. She will not survive infancy." Mara leaned forward, gently adjusting the baby's blanket. "Please," I whispered. "No. Don't do this." Plague turned to me. "This is not your test," he said. "This is your explanation." The baby stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. And she looked directly at me. Not past me. At me. My vision blurred instantly. I staggered back, clutching my arm as pain exploded through it. Every scar burned at once, searing hot. "She sees you," Plague said softly. "That's impossible," I gasped. "No," he corrected. "It is inevitable." The baby's gaze didn't waver. Her small mouth opened slightly, as if trying to form a sound. I felt something pull inside my chest. Not the call. Something deeper. Older. Recognition. She's mine," I said, the truth settling into place with sickening clarity. Plague inclined his head. "The bloodline does not wait for permission," he said. "Only continuation." My legs gave out. I fell to my knees beside the crib. Mara didn't react. She couldn't see me. Couldn't hear me. But the baby could. Her tiny hand lifted weakly, fingers curling in the air toward me. I sobbed. "You said I'd be free when an heir replaced me," I said. "She's too young. She'll die." "Yes," Plague said. "Unless." I looked up at him. "Unless what?" "Unless the burden transfers early," he said. Accelerated claiming. My heart pounded violently. You mean? She would not serve as you do, Plague continued. She would not guard. She would not observe. Then what? I demanded. Plague's eyes fixed on mine. She would carry. I understood then. Not the job. The weight. The memories. The deaths. The pressure that was already crushing me. You want me to give this to her? I whispered. No, Plague said. The bloodline will. The baby whimpered softly, her breathing uneven. I felt the dead stir around me, that invisible crowd tightening. You don't get to do this, I said. She's a child. Plague's voice dropped. You interfered once, he said. You survived. This is the cost. The room began to dissolve. As it did, I saw something that froze my blood. Faint scars. On the baby's arm. Not fully formed. But beginning. When I woke up in my apartment, I was screaming. My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. A text message from an unknown number. You have 7 days to decide. I stared at my arm. The sixth rule throbbed painfully. And beneath it, something new was starting to carve itself into my skin. The first thing I did was try to run. I didn't pack. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't even put on proper shoes. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and yanked the door open like a man escaping a fire. The hallway was empty. Too empty. The air felt thick, charged, like the seconds before a storm breaks. My footsteps sounded wrong, muted, delayed, as if the building itself was absorbing them. I made it 3 steps before the pressure hit. Not pain. Not the burning of the rules. Grief. Raw, overwhelming grief that wasn't mine. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, clutching my chest as images slammed into my head. A man kneeling beside a wrecked motorcycle. A woman screaming in a hospital corridor. A child standing alone at a bus stop long after dark. Deaths in progress. Deaths waiting. They were close. Stop, I whispered. Please. The pressure eased slightly. I understood then. I wasn't being restrained. I was being needed. I spent the next 2 days trying everything else. I went to a church, even though I hadn't believed in God since I was a teenager. The moment I crossed the threshold, every candle in the place snuffed out at once. The priest stared straight through me and began reciting last rites to an empty pew. I went to a police station. My reflection didn't appear in the glass doors. The officer at the desk kept asking me to repeat myself, his eyes sliding off my face like I wasn't quite there. I went to the registry. The woman behind the counter didn't look surprised to see me. You're early, she said, stamping a document. Is there a way out? I asked. A loophole. Something my family missed. She sighed and removed her glasses. There's always a way out, she said. That's how they keep you compliant. That's not an answer. She leaned forward. Your uncle found one, she said quietly. My blood ran cold. Robert? She nodded. He discovered that a familiar can refuse transfer. It destabilizes the system. Hope flared in my chest. Then why? Because the cost is total, she interrupted. Not erasure. Worse. Tell me. She hesitated for the first time since I'd met her. If you refuse the bloodline, she said, death stops answering you. I frowned. That sounds good. She shook her head slowly. Not for you, she said. For everyone connected to you. My stomach dropped. You become a blind spot, she continued. accidents without collection, disease without mercy, suffering without structure. I thought of the hospital fire, of Plague's words. We provide structure. You'd break the system, I whispered. For a radius, she corrected. Around you. Around your blood. For generations. I staggered back. So my uncle chose that, she said. He ran. Hid. Refused to pass it on. And wherever he settled, she said softly, death became messy. The images hit me then. Not memories. Records. A town with a suicide rate triple the national average. A nursing home where residents lingered for weeks in agony. A maternity ward where stillbirths spiked inexplicably. All centered around the place that no longer existed on any map. They didn't erase him to punish him, she said. They erased him to contain him. I left the registry shaking. On the fourth night, Plague came to me again. He didn't appear suddenly this time. He was already there, sitting at my kitchen table, hands folded, patient. You are running out of time, he said. I won't give her to you, I replied. My voice was hoarse. I won't put this on her. Plague regarded me carefully. You already have, he said. The marks are forming. I can refuse. Yes, he said. And I will respect that. The words surprised me. But understand this, Plague continued. Refusal does not save her. It only changes how she dies. I clenched my fists. You're manipulating me. No, he said calmly. I am informing you. The breathing around me intensified, dozens of invisible presences pressing close. Why her? I demanded. Why my blood? Plague looked at my arm. Because your line endures, he said. Because it adapts. Because you looked at what you were never meant to see and did not break. I am breaking, I whispered. Yes, he agreed. Into something else. On the sixth day, Mara called me. I hadn't given her my number. I don't know why I'm calling you, she said, her voice exhausted and scared. But you were in my dream. You were standing over her crib, crying. My heart shattered. She's getting worse, Mara continued. The doctors don't know why. It's like her body is carrying something too heavy. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. For what? Mara asked. For watching, I said. The line went dead. That night, the seventh scar finished carving itself into my arm. I understood it without reading. The line continues. At midnight, Plague stood beside my bed. It is time, he said. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I choose, I said. The world held its breath. The first thing I did was try to run. I didn't pack. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't even put on proper shoes. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and yanked the door open like a man escaping a fire. The hallway was empty. Too empty. The air felt thick, charged, like the seconds before a storm breaks. My footsteps sounded wrong, muted, delayed, as if the building itself was absorbing them. I made it 3 steps before the pressure hit. Not pain. Not the burning of the rules. Grief. Raw, overwhelming grief that wasn't mine. I collapsed against the wall, gasping, clutching my chest as images slammed into my head, a man kneeling beside a wrecked motorcycle, a woman screaming in a hospital corridor, a child standing alone at a bus stop long after dark. Deaths in progress. Deaths waiting. They were close. Stop, I whispered. Please. The pressure eased slightly. I understood then. I wasn't being restrained. I was being needed. I spent the next 2 days trying everything else. I went to a church, even though I hadn't believed in God since I was a teenager. The moment I crossed the threshold, every candle in the place snuffed out at once. The priest stared straight through me and began reciting last rites to an empty pew. I went to a police station. My reflection didn't appear in the glass doors. The officer at the desk kept asking me to repeat myself, his eyes sliding off my face like I wasn't quite there. I went to the registry. The woman behind the counter didn't look surprised to see me. "You're early," she said, stamping a document. "Is there a way out?" I asked. "A loophole. Something my family missed." She sighed and removed her glasses. "There's always a way out," she said. "That's how they keep you compliant." "That's not an answer." She leaned forward. "Your uncle found one," she said quietly. My blood ran cold. "Robert?" She nodded. "He discovered that a familiar can refuse transfer. It destabilizes the system." Hope flared in my chest. "Then why?" "Because the cost is total," she interrupted. "Not erasure. Worse. Tell me." She hesitated for the first time since I'd met her. "If you refuse the bloodline," she said, "death stops answering you." I frowned. "That sounds good." She shook her head slowly. "Not for you," she said. "For everyone connected to you." My stomach dropped. "You become a blind spot," she continued. "Accidents without collection. Disease without mercy. Suffering without structure." I thought of the hospital fire. Of Plague's words. "We provide structure. You'd break the system," I whispered. "For a radius," she corrected. "Around you. Around your blood. For generations." I staggered back. "So my uncle chose that," she said. "He ran. Hid. Refused to pass it on. And wherever he settled," she said softly, "death became messy." The images hit me then. Not memories. Records. A town with a suicide rate triple the national average. A nursing home where residents lingered for weeks in agony. A maternity ward where stillbirths spiked inexplicably. All centered around the place that no longer existed on any map. "They didn't erase him to punish him," she said. "They erased him to contain him." I left the registry shaking. On the fourth night, Plague came to me again. He didn't appear suddenly this time. He was already there, sitting at my kitchen table, hands folded, patient. "You are running out of time," he said. "I won't give her to you," I replied. My voice was hoarse. "I won't put this on her." Plague regarded me carefully. "You already have," he said. "The marks are forming. I can refuse." "Yes," he said. "And I will respect that." The words surprised me. "But understand this," Plague continued. "Refusal does not save her. It only changes how she dies." I clenched my fists. "You're manipulating me." "No," he said calmly. "I am informing you." The breathing around me intensified, dozens of invisible presences pressing close. "Why her?" I demanded. "Why my blood?" Plague looked at my arm. "Because your line endures," he said. "Because it adapts. Because you looked at what you were never meant to see and did not break." "I am breaking," I whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "Into something else." On the 6th day, Mara called me. I hadn't given her my number. "I don't know why I'm calling you," she said, her voice exhausted and scared. "But you were in my dream. You were standing over her crib, crying." My heart shattered. "She's getting worse," Mara continued. The doctors don't know why. It's like her body is carrying something too heavy. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered. For what? Mara asked. For watching, I said. The line went dead. That night, the seventh scar finished carving itself into my arm. I understood it without reading. The line continues. At midnight, Plague stood beside my bed. It is time, he said. I looked at my hands. They were steady. I choose, I said. The world held its breath. I didn't scream when the world ended. That surprises people when I tell them. They expect thunder, fire, some grand collapse of reality. But the truth is quieter, softer. The moment I chose, the room unfolded. My walls peeled away like paper soaked in blood. The ceiling stretched upward into a black infinity threaded with dim, drifting lights, souls mid-transit, I would later learn. The bed dissolved beneath me, and I was standing barefoot on obsidian glass that reflected not my face, but every version of me that could have existed. Plague stood across from me, taller now, his form no longer restrained by human proportions. Wings, if that's what they were, hung behind him like rotting veils. His scythe rested upright, its blade dull and pitted, as if it had cut through centuries rather than flesh. You understand what this means, he said. Yes, I replied. My voice didn't shake. You will not be thanked, Plague continued. You will not be remembered. You will be hated by those who glimpse you at the wrong moment. You will witness the end of thousands daily and be forbidden from intervening. I know. You will watch children die, he said. Slowly. I already have. Something in his expression shifted. Not approval. Not pity. Recognition. The registry rose around us, column by column, an impossible cathedral of paperwork and chains. Figures moved in the distance, clerks, reapers, things that had never been human but wore humanity like a uniform. Plague lifted his scythe. Then kneel. I did. The blade touched my shoulder. And I felt everything. Every death Plague had ever guided poured into me, not the pain, not the terror, but the weight. The understanding of what it means to end a life cleanly. To sever without cruelty. To close a door that would otherwise rot on its hinges. I saw pandemics burn through cities like quiet fires. I saw hospital rooms where families whispered goodbyes they'd rehearsed for weeks. I saw mercy disguised as tragedy. When it ended, I was gasping, forehead pressed to the black glass. Rise, Plague said. I stood. My reflection returned. But it wasn't just me anymore. The scars on my arm had changed. The rules were still there, but something new wrapped around them like iron scripture. The familiar may be seen by those who are not meant to die alone. You added a rule, I said. I amended an old one, Plague replied. You earned it. The first reap as mine happened an hour later. A hospital. ICU. A man in his late 40s, organs failing, body clinging to life out of stubbornness rather than hope. Machines screamed softly around him. His wife slept in a chair, her hand wrapped around his like an anchor. Plague didn't enter the room. You will do this one, he said. My throat tightened. I can't. You can't, he corrected. And you must. I stepped forward. The man's eyes fluttered open. He saw me. That was new. You're not a doctor, he rasped. No, I said gently. But I'm here to walk you the rest of the way. Tears slid down his temples. Will it hurt? I shook my head. He squeezed his wife's hand one last time. And let go. No alarms. No panic. Just peace. When we left, Plague inclined his head. Well done. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into a rhythm that rewired my sense of time. 3,000 deaths a day. Some swift. Some cruel. Some overdue. I learned when to stand back and when to be seen. I learned how to quiet a room without a word. I learned that children who saw me weren't cursed, they were brave. I also learned what happens when rules are broken. A familiar from another line tried to interfere. Tried to save someone chosen by old age. The punishment wasn't pain. It was loneliness. They removed his ability to be perceived at all. He still exists. But no one has looked at him in 50 years. I stopped sleeping. Didn't need to. Didn't dream. Until one night, when I found myself standing outside a familiar house. Mara's house. I froze. Plague appeared beside me. You are not required to do this, he said. But I can, I replied. Inside, Mara sat on the couch, her daughter asleep against her chest. The girl's breathing was steady now. Strong. She had my eyes. Not biologically. Spiritually. I stepped into the room. Mara looked up. Saw me. Didn't scream. I knew you were real, she whispered. I knelt in front of them. She's safe, I said. For a long time. Mara's shoulders collapsed as she sobbed. Thank you, she breathed. I don't know what you are, but thank you. I stood and backed away. At the door, the child stirred. Her eyes opened. Locked onto mine. She smiled. And waved. Plague and I vanished into the dark. That was years ago. I still work every day. I still follow the rules. But sometimes, rarely, I am allowed to bend one. And if, one night, you feel a presence beside your hospital bed, if you feel calm instead of afraid, if you think you see someone watching over you, crying quietly, that's not death. That's me. And I promise, you won't go alone.